Theresa Carter is a business advisor, a leadership coach, and insights discovery practitioner. She's got 20 years' experience as an HR specialist, spanning a range of creative and digital industries and sizes of business. So she's worked with startups all the way through to corporates. She helps business owners to realize their goals through supporting and aligning their business strategy with a strategic people and culture plan. A big warm welcome, Theresa.
Thank you, Jenny. Really happy to be here with you.
I'm really happy to have you on the show because I know that you are going to provide so much value. We've already done a bit of a pre-chat, and already I've learned so much. I've got taken loads of notes. So let's kick off. Let's get straight into the good stuff. So for an agency owner listening, first of all, can you explain why it's so important to align the business strategy with a strategic people and culture plan?
Okay. Yeah, great starting point. First of all, what is a strategic people and culture plan? Many people say, well, what is that? Why do I need it? Um, I think really the simple answer is that if you want to reach your goals and your growth potential as a business, you really need to ensure that you've got the right culture, the right structure, and a high performing team that are behind you and on the journey with you. And actually, these things don't just happen. I think often I have lots of people that speak to me and they say things like, oh, when we were smaller, it was really easy. Everyone just kind of got it. It changed when we were growing. I don't know exactly when, but I look back and it's now a little bit different and I don't understand why. And the reason is because it doesn't just happen. It actually takes a lot of hard work and a lot of thought. And you have to think and do these things every day, I'm afraid. So in the same way that you're really focused on your commercial goals about your product, your service, who your clients are, how you're going to get them, you need to really think about, in order to deliver those things, what's our culture going to be like? What's it going to be like around here? Who are the people that we're going to have? Who are the people that we need for now and who do we need for the future? And how do we get them? So that strategic people plan is all around that. It's all around what culture you want, the people around you, aligning that, as I've said, with your business goals, ensuring that people are on the same journey as you. When you're small, and you've got that small team around you, it's easy because by osmosis, often you're all on the same thing, working together, spaghetti rolls, everyone does a little bit of everything. And as you grow and get a little bit more structure, you can lose some of that osmosis. So you do need to make sure you've got ways of working and communicating that mean that you're all on that same journey. So I often talk to people there, Jenny, about, is everyone living the values of the business? Do we have values? Do we know what the values of the business are? Those values should always be the values, really. They're your building blocks. So, and how do we know if people are living values? Well, we look at the behaviours that are turning up in the workplace. And so you know if people are living the values and the vision, if you can see that in the way that they're behaving, turning up and acting with each other. Yeah. Um, I've mentioned about having the right people in the right seats at the right time. That's a really important part of that kind of strategic people plan. Um, Sometimes the people that start on a journey with you will go through the whole journey with you and they will grow and embrace change and move forward. Sometimes the people that start, they decide, or you may decide that maybe they're not going to be on the journey with you for the whole way because the way in which the business is changing or the wants and needs of you and them don't align anymore. So actually we need to be brave in those moments as well and actually acknowledge those things, because what can happen is that you can try taking people on a journey that they don't really want to be on anymore. So again, I talk about transparency and honesty, all obviously within a legal framework, etc., and doing things in the right human way. But I often see lots of issues from people where they're just too scared to have some honest conversations, I'll be honest, and they happen too late. So yes, and also in that plan will be things about knowing, and that comes into knowing your people, knowing who they are, what they want, where they are, where they want to go, rewarding and engaging them. So if they're on this journey, what's in it for them? What are they going to get? Um, Being authentic, listening to your people. And when I say being authentic and listening, actively listen. take in what they're saying. You can't do everything that people want you to do as an employer, but you can actively listen and you can respond. And I think that's the most important thing that people are looking for as well. Um, and everything you do, say, don't do, the decisions, the looks on your face, the timing, everything impacts your culture. So it's not an easy thing. And this is why I think a lot of people go, I can't do this. How do I do this? There's a lot of stuff there and it feels a bit messy. And I suppose what I help people do is to demystify all of that and simplify it and find a place to start, essentially.
Wow, so many nuggets already. So, I mean, if I had to sum it up in one word, I'd probably, on hearing all that, and messy is such a great word. It's being more intentional
Yes,
about how you're building the company.
absolutely. You have to have that intent. And most people do know that intent, but they don't realize actually that they need to essentially kind of get that into a plan. Um, and Jenny, I know I've spoken to you before about this kind of explaining a people plan, and I think the analogy I often use to help people understand, well, where do you start? And I just use that analogy of a jigsaw puzzle, to be honest.
Mm.
Um, we can all approach jigsaw puzzles in different ways, but my favorite way is to start with the corner pieces and the outside. I am that person. I will definitely start there, and your people culture plan is no different. So what are those corner and outside pieces that we need? Because they're your building blocks. Without that, you can't really work on the other stuff inside of the puzzle. So for me, what I would suggest to to businesses and business owners is that do we have a really clear business mission, vision, values? Do we know why we're here, what we stand for? Do we know what kind of business we want and what kind of people we want with us? And when I talk about values, I also ask people to think about the behaviors. How do they want people to turn up? Often people talk about things like growth mindset, innovative thinking, being outside of the box. So let's get these things documented because they're going to play a massive part in all of the other things that are to come. We talk about knowing what our product offer and service is. Sometimes people say, oh, but your background's HR, but I've sat on as a business partner and sat on leadership teams in businesses for a long part of my career. And actually, part of HR is strategically partnering with the business to enable the business to get where it wants to get to. So actually, HR isn't all about hiring and firing and doing all the paperwork. It's a very with the right kind of mind, it's a very strategic role, which really you need this thinking quite early on in your journey. I'll come on to that in a little while because I've got some examples of people that have used this thinking very early on, and their success is, you know, it is amazing. So thinking of those other pieces around the side then that people might want to note down, what's your kind of short, medium term business plan? So what's your 3 to 5 years? We're not saying that that's exactly what you're going to achieve because we all know that you put that down and it goes off a little bit, but what path are you on? What are your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats? Have you done that SWOT analysis? That's really important in terms of knowing about your people and culture plan. What gaps do we need to fill? Who's going to be accountable and responsible for delivering this people plan? Because someone has to own and deliver that as well. And actually, it's not just one person's responsibility. It's actually the responsibility of every single person in the business. And it's how we embed that as well. And I always ask my business owners, what are the things that keep you up at night? Because we need to know what that is, because that is probably going to form some of those outside pieces of the puzzle. Simple. So once we've got all of that, we can then start building on that inside picture. And again, each business will be different. Some people might start with the sky, the sea, the house, or whatever. Because what I do with businesses, I understand where they're at and what the priorities are. And so, although lots of symptoms come up and I hear the same symptoms, the root causes are different in each business. They'll be similar, but there'll be nuances that are different. So in terms of them working on that middle piece of the puzzle, we kind of put a plan together and we prioritize. So that could be things like team structure. It could be embedding your values and your behaviors into your business because you've never done that or you're not sure how to do it. people engagement, development, training, things like one-to-ones with people, understanding where they're at, where they want to go, what their development plans are from a personal point of view. It could be reward, benefits. People might be having issues with capability and performance, and they don't know how to deal with that. So we can then build all of these things in. But what I would say is that the golden thread that hangs everything together are those pieces that we've built around the edge. Because what will happen is we'll come to work on one of the projects in the middle, and I'll say, well, the issue is because you haven't got this, this, or this. And it all comes back to that. So for me, having done this for many years and helped many businesses and seen many people feel the same way, we always start in generally the same places. It doesn't mean we get all the same results because we're all individual businesses with our own context, but I've got I would say for me it's simple because I've done so much of it, but actually I've got a really clear plan that can help people on that journey.
So let me pause you there because you've just already shared so much. And I love the analogy of using a jigsaw puzzle and putting the pieces, the core pieces, because you said that when people come to me with the symptoms, if I dig and I do some investigating, it always comes back to one of those pieces. So can you just, for those listening, share some of those typical symptoms that people come to you first with?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So turnover, attracting the right staff is often a symptom and an issue. Um, we all know, gosh, in my 24 years, recruitment has never been easy, but year on year it's got more difficult. And I think, off the back of our COVID years, that 20 to 23 period, it became a very strange place. Um, but I think what I talk to people about is saying, well, what's attracting people to your business? Why would they want to come and work for you? And I think things have changed over the 24 years that I've done this. When I started off in my career, people would want to come and work for a business. And they were selling themselves to that business. And often the business didn't really feel like it needed to do much because, well, surely they want to work for us. That's not the case anymore. It's a very much 50-50 split. I say to candidates, make sure you ask all of the questions, push the interviewers, know the business that you're going into, dig down into the culture, ask to talk to people that will tell you what it's really like there day to day. And so, as you can see, if you haven't sorted those bits of your jigsaw out, which is what do we stand for? What are our values? What kind of people are going to be successful here? And, who can we help to drive forward? If we haven't got those answers, when it comes to retaining or engaging staff, you're you're not going to do very well, I'll be honest, in this day and age. You need to have a really good plan there of engagement, retention, and attraction. So having really clear brand values, what you stand for, but you can't just have that on paper and in name. You need to be able to demonstrate how that is lived every day, and that comes from the people that they meet as part of the process.
So let's suppose you've got an agency owner that started the business alone
Mhm.
and has started to slowly build the team. And maybe they're one of the more forward-thinking ones that established their values,
Yeah.
their set of values from the
Mhm.
beginning.
Yeah.
And they've been hiring on the back of that because they've got a clear template for what they're
Mhm.
looking for and how everyone needs to align. Is there a point in the size of the business where they need to revisit those values and evolve them or change them? Or are the values the values? Like, do they evolve with the size of the business? Probably a silly question, but
No, no, not at all. And it's a really good question because I'm a purist in the fact that I believe that business is built on core values and those values do not change. What will change is the context around the business, and the business needs to be agile to the context. Um, and what we then also need to maybe a little bit agile with are the behaviours that we expect to see. Okay, so people will often say, yeah, but what is a value? It's, to be innovative, to be this, to be whatever it might be. But for what I help clients do is build out those values into actual tangible behaviors. So we expect our people to turn up and in a situation they would react in this way, they would behave in this way. So growth mindset is a great one, and you hear people say, rather than coming with a problem, you come and say, oh, this has happened. I'd love to talk through my two thoughts about which way I go. What would that be okay? that's what someone wants to hear, right? Or, oh wow, just seen all of this stuff going on AI. I've been tinkering at home. I came across this. What do you think? We could try and solve this business problem with it. So what we want to be able to see in innovation, growth mindset, creativity, commerciality, we want to see the behaviors. And so what I help people do is to be able to pinpoint what those behaviors are, because then once when we know those behaviors are, when we are recruiting, for instance, we are looking for demonstration of people using those behaviors and those skills in their everyday. When we are looking at, you know, uh, maybe quarterly reviews, one-to-ones with people, we are picking up on not just what they've done task-wise, but the way in which they've approached it, the way in which they've behaved. And by rewarding and acknowledging behavior, what we start to see and do is that people will behave more in that way. People around them will notice that and they will start to react and behave in that way. And then we start to move into a place of kind of psychological safety because we all kind of know what's expected of each other. And when we get to there, if someone's tipping that scale a little bit and maybe, I don't know, it often happens, another symptom, Jenny, is that somebody brings a new person in and it all feels different or they're not a culture fit. We thought they were going to be perfect. And it's because actually, when you look through the scope, you see that the behaviors are off kilter with the behaviors of the rest of the business. And they stick out like a sore thumb. And it only takes one person to come into a really established team and have very different behaviors. And they're either going to self-select and go because they don't feel safe, or you're going to have to really work on that and bring it to someone's attention. So sorry, I've swayed around a little bit
No,
there,
you
but
haven't at all. We've
it all connect. And this is the thing about people and the HR side of things and culture is everything is interconnected, and there's no way of it's difficult to unconnect it, to be honest.
I think this has really been helpful already because what you're saying is like set the values. But those values, if you haven't done that exercise, for those listening, maybe
Oh,
they're not, maybe they need to pick them out and dust them off again and think like, right, hang on a sec, what are we doing with these? We talked about it, but we're not really living it. We're not using it as a benchmark for selecting people to come and join us. We're not evaluating our team based on whether they're living those values
yeah.
and displaying those behaviors as you say. So already super, super useful. I think the other thing I wanted to dig into
Mhm.
from a selfish point of view slightly before I go on to the rest of the questions is your second jigsaw puzzle piece that you mentioned, which was making sure that you have the right product offerings and services. Now, maybe a symptom that I see when I'm
Mm.
teaching account managers how to cross sell, upsell, there is often some gaps in understanding of actually the plethora of services that the agency offers.
Mhm.
So, as a result, maybe of, and this is what I wondered if you could speak to that moment, speak to that a little bit. Where do you see, because I see the symptom, which is that individual is responsible for retention and growth of the client relationship, is talking to the client,
Mhm.
should be well versed in understanding what other services they offer.
Yeah. And this it's interesting. I was just having a conversation not that long ago about a very similar thing. There are a number of things at play here, aren't there? There's clear roles and responsibilities within an organization, but there's also capability. And I think when we see roles such as client services, account managers, etc., we have to be clear, are they the product owners and the service specialists? Or are they actually the specialist at the relationship and developing and seeing opportunity? And I think what I see, Jenny, in agencies, I suppose from my point of view, is that this is a really difficult one because, is that your client services account management, there's so much expected of them. They're expected to know all of the different products and services. They're also expected to understand and be able to tune into that client and go, and have that light bulb moment and connect the pieces. Um, but they're not always the product owner or the service owner, that's somebody else. So we have to look internally really clearly at our roles, responsibilities, but also the way in which teams work together. So often what you'll find is product owners generally sit within a different service to your client services. And there's usually a tension, let's be honest, in every agency I've ever worked in or supported. But I've seen it be a really positive, beautiful tension of innovation and spark and magic. And I've seen it be quite the opposite. So for me, it is about clear roles and responsibilities. It's about understanding each other, um, and where we're coming from as well as individuals and people. And I think that's really important because sometimes we're just like, this is our role, this is what we're doing, this is what we're trying to drive towards, but we stop to remember that we're human beings and individuals. And I think in this remote world as well, Jenny, what I find is that ability for people to connect and build rapport and relationship within teams internally is much more difficult in some circumstances. So they don't really know much about each other. And then when they might have a little bit of tension or they're trying to get somewhere on a commercial front, because they haven't got that grounding rapport relationship on a human level, it makes it a little bit more difficult. So I don't know if I'm going down lots of rabbit holes here, but I think for me, it's again, it's not straightforward. There are lots of different things. And one of the things I use with teams, so I do a lot of coaching, whether it's individual or team coaching or leadership coaching as well. And one of the tools I use is something called Insights Discovery. And it's a beautiful tool in the fact that first and foremost, it allows people to understand more about themselves and their choices in how they turn up and communicate. But when we know that about ourselves and we know the theory around this model, we can then understand other people's profiles and how they turn up to the world. And I've done these sessions, Jenny, with people cross-functionally, where you might have product owners, creative services, client services. And the magic that happens in these moments of discovery with each other. And almost instantly, the week after, people are just working in a completely different way because they've got this different understanding, and they've also got a common safe language of this insights discovery profile and language, which it's not me saying, oh, excuse me, I find the way that you talk to me a little bit difficult. It's saying, you turn up with this really high energy. I've actually got the opposite energy to you on the wheel. So that means that actually we are probably going to see the things that annoy us in each other, but actually we know that now. So I know we're not annoying each other. I know that actually we want to work towards the same thing, but we see the world a bit differently. Let's figure out how we're going to make this work. And so beautiful things can happen, but we have to set the stall, roles, responsibilities, clear ways of working, knowing ourselves and each other, building relationships. And again, that's not easy. It doesn't just happen, and it takes time. It takes time.
I think I love the sound of the insights discovery exercise that you
Mm.
do. Presumably, you do that in person as a whole team. And obviously, I think probably people listening can see the clear benefits of doing that from what you've said. Can
Yes.
you bring that to life a little bit? Like, if someone's thinking, gosh, that's what I need. I need to, maybe we've all been working remotely. It hasn't particularly worked fantastically well. There are some tensions, blah, blah, blah.
Mm.
Talk us through, you know, first of all, symptomatically, are what kind of problems are people presenting with, that would be a good candidate to do this process?
Yeah, okay. I think there are many different reasons why people might want to do it. People may do it because actually they're like, actually, this is a really good team building development opportunity. It's very rich. I mean, you answer 25 questions on a portal and then, a 28-page report comes out. And you don't just get that, by the way. I I coach people through that and all of the theory and everything behind it. It's done in a very safe way. Um, but what it can do, it highlights our preferences in how we turn up and communicate. It highlights what we bring to the team. It highlights the ways in which you should communicate with me and not communicate with me. Um, yes, what I bring to the team, and it delves in. You can go to so many levels with it, but I tend to always start on a team level. You can do it remotely, but I actually find well, we can do it remotely now because we went through COVID and Insights found an amazing way for us to do it online. So that can work as well. But I think where I get the most benefit is where we do it in a room, and we're all together. And because I think you get so much more out of that. And so people will use it really, and it's about knowing you and how you turn up, helping you with your development and things like that. But I do see the biggest value add is the change in communication and understanding of each other. And I see it often in situ halfway through the session, Jenny, where I remember being in a session with a team, and somebody kind of talked about what are the things that I'm not so keen, these are the things that I'm not so keen and stuff on. And they read out a few things, and they're very vulnerable and honest and transparent. And everyone around the room was like, but you're really good at that stuff. And the individual said, well, yeah, because I do it, because I know no one else really wants to do it. And I do it because that's what we need to do, and the team needs, and the business needs. But they then found out what that was doing to that individual, in the fact that the energy that it's taking for that individual to step into that place. And you could see everyone in the room going, oh my gosh, didn't realize. And so there was this appreciation that this person's stepping into a place where it's not natural for them, but they're doing it for the good of the team and the business. And then the team around them are going, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that about you. And then what happens? Everyone else's barriers start to come down and they start sharing things. And before you know it, you've got some real, honest, authentic truths out there. And when you've got authentic truths, and you learn to communicate and behave in that way, you can only move on to much better things. And that's where we get to a high performing team, Jenny. I talk about high performing teams, and that's when people are all in the same place. They are all working towards the same vision and values. People are turning up, but they're holding each other to account and they're being honest about things. And I don't think we see enough of that in business. But that's because of the psychological safety, and people are worried. So again, it comes back to the building blocks and having those in place, because then we can move forward. So yeah, but there are many tools. Insights is just one of them, but it's one of my absolute favorites, and it's something, every time I do it, I learn something new about myself as well. And I think that's what's really important as a coach and a mentor, etc., is that you're always finding out more about yourself as well on these journeys.
Yeah, love it. And it's something that is underpinned by DISC, right?
Yes, it is.
Lots
So,
of people.
yeah, there are lots
Yeah.
of different companies, but people often say, "Oh, it's the color thing." So, yeah, Insights Discovery. People can Google and find the company, etc. Their head office is based in Scotland, um, but I've done all of the training, and I'm a practitioner with them, etc. So I have direct access to them. They're wonderful in the fact that they're always bringing out new, innovative ways to use the tool. So I'm actually in January, I'm on 4 different training courses to kind of upskill as well, so that I can bring all of that to my clients. So yes, the product is always updated. It's underpinned by DISC and Carl Jung's psychological kind of profiles. So yeah, it's a nice tool to use. And I've always got really good feedback from people that have got a lot from it, actually, on an individual, but also on a kind of team or corporate company basis.
Great. Okay, perfect. Well, thank you for sharing.
That's okay.
I'm just thinking of, and this might be very tactical, but things that people might be struggling with
Mm,
that we can maybe provide some insight around and maybe point them back to one of those building blocks.
mm,
You mentioned earlier on about getting the right people with the right skills sitting in the right seats.
yeah.
If you've got an agency owner that's saying, actually, or maybe an account manager, because a
Mhm,
lot of account managers listen to
yeah.
this, they either think they're in the wrong seat or
Mhm,
you think someone else is in the wrong seat and maybe they don't realize it.
mhm,
So there's that kind of lacking self-awareness of actually
mhm.
how well you think you're performing,
Yeah,
maybe.
yeah,
How would you unpick that symptom?
yeah. Good question. Okay, so where would you start? So I think that, I suppose, if you're an individual, I think that you can. It's about why do you feel that way? What is it, and can you kind of document? Because sometimes it's difficult because it's a bit abstract and you're not really quite sure. Sometimes talking it through with someone you trust, maybe not in the organization, but maybe a friend or a mentor or somebody like that might be useful just to kind of talk things through. Um, you know, so that would be a good thing. And then just try and document the things that just feel a bit uneasy for you, right? So it could be if you're not enjoying the work, or you feel you're not aligned to the culture, or this isn't going where you were hoping it was going to go to. All of try and document those things down because that will help just with your thoughts, etc. And then I suppose it really depends upon, from an individual point of view, what relationship you have with your manager or or the business, etc. Do they have one-to-ones in place where you can go and have a chat about things? Is there a HR team or even maybe an EAP or something like that where you could just call someone and just say, oh, I just need to just chat this through if that's okay. I know that could be a difficult thing to do because what you don't want to do is show all your hand and go, oh, I'm not invested in this. But I think you need to do some of those things to unpick. I think if you're
EAP, sorry, what's EAP?
Oh, sorry. Yes, me and my lingo. So EAP is an employee assistance program. So a lot of businesses will have those. They're like confidential helplines, and you can kind of, sometimes they have counselling or different types of help and support. Um, and that might also be a route that someone decides to just pick up the phone and talk to someone about. Um, so from an individual point of view, I would start in that way and try and just understand for yourself what it is. And then you can kind of think, actually, is there a route here where I can go and have a conversation with someone and kind of be honest about some of those things and feelings? And some people might want to do that, and that will be quite useful. Other people might feel, do you know what? This doesn't feel right. I think I am in the wrong place, etc. If you think you're in the right culture but you're in the wrong seat, I would always implore people to please have a conversation, because if you feel you're in the right culture, then actually, what are the things that are going to make you happy? What's going to drive you? Maybe there is an opportunity. It might not be right away, but there might be a way of progressing somewhere else in the business, which means that you stay in a culture that you love, with people that you enjoy working with, and that would be really positive. So I would always ask people to do that. I think often, in my career, I've done exit interviews and all these things, and people go, "Oh, if only someone had had a chat with me."
Right.
And I'm like, well, you could have chatted with us, but equally that then brings me on to, from an employer point of view, is yes, if you think someone's in the wrong seat, ask yourself, right, what's the structure? What is the role that they're doing? What is the expectation of that? Are they clear in that? Have you discussed that with them? Are they clear if they've got clear job description? So, what's the purpose of the role? What are the key accountabilities? What's the person specification? I often find, Jenny, people forget to put a person specification. They're really good at putting all the tasks down that someone needs to do. But if you ask them, well, what's this person's experience or what are they about? They're like, oh, so make sure you've got that on the job description. And most importantly, on every job description I would ever review for anyone, there must be on the bottom, what does success look like in this role? Because if you can't answer that question, you don't know, I'd question whether you need the role or if you've really thought through what that role is about. Yeah. So for me, you know, before you even recruit someone or move someone into a role, make sure you've got that absolutely key spot on, because that's what you're also going to use to set the expectation with your team member. So if you're really clear on that, if you then think that things don't seem to be going well, you should hopefully be having regular one-to-ones with your team.
Mm.
This doesn't mean it's got to be formal, written down, they've got to fill a big form out. But what I say is, even if you meet with your people on a quarterly basis, not to talk about the work and the do and the task, leave all that stuff at the door. Talk to them about who they are and how they are and what's going on for them. And they'll get used to that. It's kind of like, just catch up, well-being, touching base, your development kind of conversation. It's just being human and natural. How are things going? How are you finding things? What have you been working on? Hopefully they'll have some kind of push goals or objectives that are in place that they're working towards to help the business get to where it wants to get to. This is the whole purpose of having, people call it performance management. It's the whole point of having clear goals for the business that then cascade down to the team, they can feel that they're driving the business forward, but also learning and developing themselves. And you can have regular chats about that, and it allows you to mentor, coach, check in, put any training in place that might need to happen, but importantly, pick up on things before it gets too late. So have those conversations with your people, and understand, because if you're doing that on a regular basis, if someone's struggling, they're more likely to actually be able to say to you that they are, rather than, or you'll both come at it probably at the same time and say, I've noticed that. And they'll go, "Oh, actually, I have been struggling a bit because of X, Y, and Z. Do you think I could get some help? Or I need a bit of clarity." And that's the way in which it, if you're doing all the things, that should naturally come to that point. If you've not been doing those things and you're in a position where you think you've got the wrong person in the wrong seat, you need to do a little bit of digging and ask yourself those questions. Is the role right? Is it because the person hasn't had the right training and development? Are there things going on in their personal life? You're getting into much more of a HR process there on kind of capability, performance management, that kind of thing.
Perfect. Thank you so much. That's full of lots of great tips. And I particularly like that question at the end of the job description. That was really useful. You mentioned earlier on, Theresa, that you could share some examples of agencies that have got it
Mhm.
right.
Yes,
And maybe some, I mean, look, many agency owners are overwhelmed by how many moving pieces there are and
huge
what
amounts.
they've got to be doing.
Yeah.
So would you be able to sort of share an example where an agency was successful, but
Mhm.
doing the bare minimum, like well, so that
Yes,
they weren't fully
yes,
spending, days and days doing this, but it's like, what are the core things that made them successful?
yeah. Um, I would say, so I've got an agency in mind. One of the first things they did was recognize that they needed some external help because they didn't have this expertise, but they knew it was important. And what they were very good at, actually, they went out and they found partners to help them to put the building blocks in place. So when I met with them, they had already extensively worked with a marketing company that had helped them to put in place their values, etc. So me coming in to a very small agency in terms of numbers, and they already had these values in place, I was actually blown away, Jenny. I was like, whoa. And when they shared the values with me, I was even more blown away because it captured who they were in a nutshell. So all my interactions I'd had with them to that point, I was like, this is who you like. That authenticity was there from day one. And I think what they were very clever at doing is they found a really good partner to help them distill. So I do that for clients, but equally, you can have other people to do it. But I think what was really helpful for me was that they did that. They then recognized that actually they need some help in this people space. And I think what drove them initially to work with me was actually struggling with recruitment and that. So that's where we started to bring in, and I worked with them on those building pieces. And so we had kind of their mission, values, and then we turned that into some behaviors. And then we started that golden thread of everything we did, Jenny. So we started off with some recruitment stuff and we built that job description and we ensured that that golden thread. And I think what's wonderful is I have worked with that client for a good number of years and they have grown really successfully and they have a superb team. They're very high performing. They've got really clear values, behaviors. Everyone's got work and things to do, but I think what they've been able to do in a short amount of time is quite phenomenal, actually. And I don't spend as much time with them now as I used to, but for me, that's that's success because all the things have been put into place. They've got the right people in the right seats, living the values, driving the business. And that's all you could hope to find, to be honest. So I would say you, as an entrepreneur and a business owner, I think one of the hardest things to do is recognizing you can't do everything yourself. I've met people that are still doing VAT returns, marketing, recruitment, selling to the customers, trying. you can't do all of those things. And you don't have to bring that cost onto your payroll, but you can find specialist partners that align with you and your way of thinking. I wouldn't be right for every single agency out there because I have a specific way of working and my own values and things. But where you can find a partner that aligns, then bring them in and use their expertise and wisdom because they will help you to avoid the pitfalls and they will help you to get some of those really important things in place, quite quickly.
It makes total sense.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Theresa, I'm just conscious of your time and I want to still ask you a couple more questions if
Mhm.
that's okay.
Oh, cool.
One of the things I'm really interested in is obviously we've talked about it. You've said, entrepreneurs, agency owners have to keep up with everything, these moving parts, this
Yeah.
evolving team, this, recruitment strategy and losing people, blah, blah, blah.
Mhm.
So what is changing in the marketplace? What trends are happening? What do people need to be aware of when it comes to HR and culture?
Really good question. I was thinking about this actually, Jenny, and when I started in HR, we still had a fax machine in the office, and I shared a computer with three other people. So, I've seen a lot of change over the last 24 years. Um, I would say, a lot is always changing. I think where we're at the moment, in this world, especially around AI, etc. I think that there's a lot of possibility and excitement about the future, but I think there's also a lot of fear, from an employee point of view. And I think there's a real balance actually that employers need to get really around. Um, do they have an AI strategy? I think they need to have one. I think they need to have communication around it because um, they should be thinking about it. Otherwise, they're going to get a bit left behind. But equally, I think that their team may be feeling some fear around what this might all mean for them, especially if we're thinking about creative space and agency. It's an obvious space. So I do think, what AI can't replace at the moment is wisdom, experience, human thinking of creativity, innovation, thinking outside of the box, etc. So those things are not going anywhere. But I do think that employers, agencies, they really need to think around that space because it's we're going to see a very different space. And I do think, over the next few years, Jenny, even those job descriptions that I talked about earlier are going to look very different. Instead of it all being task at the beginning, it's going to be who is this person? How do they think? How do they see the world? Um, because mindsets are changing, and to be able to really harness the power of AI, mindsets are going to need to change. So I do also see a lot of work needing to be done there around identifying what that looks like in your workplace, training, skills gaps. How are we bringing people along with this? That for me is, and that can't be next year's job. It's got to be the job yesterday that we were kind of thinking about. Um, I think the other thing I'll touch on is just around the change in the way that we work since COVID. I've seen a lot of people going back into offices. I think there is a place where we can have a healthy balance. Some of my clients are remote only. Some of them do it and they do it really, really well. And I've seen other businesses where they really struggle. Um, I think finding a nice place in the middle is ideally where you would want to go to because you want people to come together to form those relationships, teams, innovation, osmosis. We're humans. We do like to be with other humans, but equally, there's so much that can be said for having that time to be able to focus and think. And I suppose that leads me on to the third point I'm going to touch on, which is the last about things people are talking about, is the world that we live in and the openness and the understanding now that we have, thankfully, around neurodivergence. And I think that neurodivergence has always been around. Someone once said to me, "Oh, well, Pluto's always been there, but we didn't know until 19, whatever it was. I can't remember the number." And I love that analogy because actually neurodivergence has always been here. Um, we we all think in different ways. We've all got a brain, but like a fingerprint, they're all very different. Our brains are, they're one-offs and they're magical and they're powerful. And what we have to do is find our superpower and then we need to leash it on the world. And I actually think that's what employers have got to be much better at doing is really educating themselves around neurodivergence, not being scared of the word or what it might mean, because it's people with brilliant minds. And that's, I'll leave it there because it's something I'm very passionate
I
about.
can
And
see that.
I think it's a really important point as well.
Great. So, AI changing the way we work and also an openness to neurodivergence.
Yes.
Anything else that you are having conversations with your clients that it's worth mentioning or giving uh, some
Yes.
advice to anyone listening, whether
Yeah.
they are an employee or an employer?
Yes, I think the AI piece is a big piece that I'm talking to people about at the moment. Ways of working continues to be a big piece, whether that's bringing people back to offices, allowing people to work in different places around the world, and all of the complications and things that brings. Um, I think after COVID, people do think they can work anywhere, but actually, there's a huge legal um, and health and safety and security kind of underpinning of where people can work, and also from a HRMC tax. It's such a complex situation, and I'll be honest. There's a lot of conversation happening on a regular basis, Jenny, around that stuff. You can't just rock up and go and work anywhere, it's
That's
different for businesses that have employment entities in different countries. So I would say to business owners, if they want to have that flexibility in those policies, they need to go and get some specialist advice because it overlays employment law, tax law, immigration legislation, health and safety, IT security. So it's a minefield.
I mean, I think that's a really, really good point, well made, because yeah, we've got this, we can work from anywhere, digital nomad kind of lifestyle that we can lead now. Particularly, it's proven now for creative agencies, whilst it's not always ideal, as you said earlier on, we know it can happen. But you're right, we maybe the laws, the legal frameworks, and everything need to catch up
Yeah,
with
yes.
how that's working.
And the problem is, Jenny, is because it covers so many different areas, there's not just one person that can give you the magic answer or the policy for these things.
Yeah,
So it's again taking every business on its situation and then building out what that looks like for them and their team. But
amazing.
that's a huge thing at the moment, I would say.
I think that's really well said. Look, I think Teresa, thank you so much
Thank you
for
for
a
having
start. Honestly,
me.
I think you've given all the listeners something to think about. There are so many good points that you've made, and I'm sure people listening are thinking that resonates, that resonates, that resonates. So, ultimately, if I've got someone listening to this, who would you like to be contacted by, and what's the best way of reaching you?
Yeah, sure. Probably, LinkedIn is absolutely fine. Again, Jenny, I'm really happy for, I don't know if you're happy to like share email address, that kind of thing. That's absolutely fine as well. And I would say, it could be business owners that want to contact me to say, actually, this and this resonated. I'd like some help with that, you know. It could be individuals that are saying, you know what, I feel a bit stuck, or that was really interesting that you were saying, I'd love to get some coaching. Or it could be someone thinking, do you know what? Actually, yeah, we need to develop our team or our leadership, or we need to find a different way to communicate with each other, etc. What about insight? So there are many different things, that may resonate. I'm always super happy to have an intro call with somebody because again, it's quite difficult to productize, what I do because actually what I want to make sure is that the solution that I'm giving to any client is the right one for them. So a conversation is where it all starts. So I'm super happy if anybody, wants to have a conversation that's okay as well.
Great. So Theresa Carter on LinkedIn, and we'll also include your email address in the show notes. Teresa, thank you so much for joining me. It's been brilliant. So thank you.
Oh, thank you for having me, Jenny. I've loved it. Thank you.